Hello, my name is the Lake Pond, and this is my first recorded franchise playthrough on Planet Zoo. I've been doing franchise for on and off 2 years, give or take, and I decided that I should probably record something and probably put it out on YouTube. It's been a big inspiration for me for years to do something similar to this. I've watched so many content creators play in Planet Zoo, and it is a low-key passion of mine. And I wanted to realistically show you guys the process that I go through when it comes to playing Planet Zoo, at least. So we're going to start off with the zoo itself. This is Willowcreek. As you can see here, it's a flat, temperate North American zoo. I personally like using the wooden path for these entranceways. I think they look a lot better than the concrete anyway. And I like to align it to the grid because I like a little bit of, order and straightness to it. I also like to give it a little bit of length, that way it's not so tight to the entrance. So my first thought for Willowcreek would be to add in a exhibit. It would be nice for a place for guests to eat, drink, and come see some really cool animals. So I thought, what better animal to start with than the brown-throated sloth? There will be parts in the Let's Play and I guess Let's Build or Speed Build where I will speed up the process of me doing things, but I want to kind of highlight the struggles that I do when it comes to building and to make sure you guys see every inch of the build that I do. Every misinput, every time that I decide something doesn't look right, every time that it doesn't sit right with me, and I just want to show my thought process in a way, I guess. So what I've started to do here is make a custom flooring, because I think that really makes a zoo pop. I think it looks a lot more natural than just windy roads that lead to the exhibits. I think it gives it a bit more personality as well. But I'm here, I'm trying to choose what I think looks good or not. And as I said, I'm going to be showing the process of what I believe looks good, what I believe doesn't look good, and we'll go from there. And I believe I actually selected the correct thing. I think I want to call it just the white brick is super nice to look at least. Here I'm going to change the terrain just to short grass because I don't like the grass poking through. I think it's not nice, nor realistic. So what I want to do here is just align the exhibit to the pathway that I've already made, just to give it a little bit of distance from the path. We'll be eventually connecting it to the path, so it is kind of still close to the entrance, like I kind of said I didn't really want to do, just to avoid congestion a little bit, but I believe it turns out alright, in my opinion. But yeah, I'm gonna continue doing the pathing around it just to make it look a little bit more pretty, because I really like these walkthrough exhibits, and I think they were such a good addition to the actual game. Here is the point where I'm gonna struggle with the pathing just a little bit. I'm no expert, but I like to think I got things a little bit more down than normal. But I like things to be a little bit straight, but I needed to see just where I'm working, so we are backtracking just a little bit, but again, showing the mistakes. So what I'm doing here is just removing the panels on the exhibit's walls. That way I can see where I'm working. This gives me a little bit more freedom in what I could do customization wise, so to make it just look a little bit more pretty than just a box that's just people walking through it. So here I'm gonna struggle just a little bit to get things aligned, but if you have any problems with that, just change the grid size to a 2. I find that often helps me, but I'm also kind of like experimenting what kind of paneling or walling or wall even that I want for a building that is going to be attached to the Sloth exhibit eventually. As I said, I want there to be a place for food, a drink, and a general chill area, possibly education maybe eventually. But for what I don't know here is I'm actually off the grid. I'm a little bit sunken in the ground, so I do fix this a little bit later. But at this current point, I don't know this, so I got really confused and wanted to try and make something look pretty on that screen door, and it was not working for me. And I eventually raised up the elevation just a little bit to the whole building itself, which is kind of nice. It's nice to have a little bit more length, I guess, in the building itself. But you can see me here struggling with the door, like it doesn't align, and my brain was not processing that the whole building was actually like a little bit sunken into the floor. As I'm looking at the floor pieces now for the little house that I'm making that's connected to the exhibit, I realistically wanted this to be a little bit of a food court. Maybe, some food and drink before you go and see the sloths might be a cool thing. Although I would very much like it that people didn't feed the sloths, but I don't think that the guests are, programmed to do that with exhibits at least, which is a good thing. But here I'm struggling with figuring out what I want the floor to look like, because I don't want it to match the actual walls. That way, it would blend in, and I don't think I like that. And I do, miss input a lot when it comes to looking at things. My keyboard's not exactly very well tailored for my hands, I guess. But or either that, or I just fat thumb everything. So, but I do eventually settle on a really nice flooring, which I believe is these kind of like stained wood flooring, which I quite like. It definitely pops in comparison to it. But again, that little trick of changing the grid size to a 2 always does me justice. But I still at this point do not recall the whole building being still sunken in the floor, even though I can now see it through editing. But I get a small feeling that I might do it sooner or later. But again, removing that long grass because it's kind of icky. But yeah, I want to, even though I made a mistake of it being like low in the ground, I just wanted a little bit of elevation on it anyway. I mentioned length. It's actually, or width even. It's probably length. I'm not exactly smart on these things, and that's absolutely fine. We're human and we make mistakes. But I do like how tall this thing is now. I'm trying to figure out where windows should go to make it look decent. I don't think in the end I was entirely happy where I put the windows, but it wasn't of an even number or an odd number, the numbers I want. But I kind of like notice here how low down the windows are, and it was confusing me. That's why I kept putting them in and out and whatnot, and I didn't like how they looked. I don't like windows being too close to corners in the end, but in the end, what can you do if you've only got a 4 length building like that, how I've decided to make? Now, finally, I've figured out that my building was actually sunken into the floor. So I've made sure I'm on the group for the building, and I've gone and made sure that I've selected every piece of wall, which is very tedious to do sometimes. So if you're, making a big building, please remember to check your sunken in walls, I guess, but see how this looks a lot better now. You know, it's more aligned to the floor, there's a little bit of elevation to the windows, you know, it looks better, and I'm happy with it. I do want to say at this point in my build, my lovely cat Lilith decided to climb on the desk that I'm working on and fall off of it, and I was a little bit concerned about her, so I did take a very short break. It is roughly around about here that I noticed that I didn't actually pause my gameplay, and it got very dark in the game, and I got kind of annoyed that I forgot to pause the game, and I had to sit there and waste time for the sun to come back up so I can actually see what I'm doing. So that was fun. Here I've started to change the windows because, as I said before, I didn't like the look of them. I think it was better off being more central. I think the two work. Obviously, I misplaced them. There's just a common occurrence in any game I play, really, but especially Zoo. But yeah, just trying to fix the holes that I've made and just make it look pretty still. It's not exactly what I would want 100%, but it works. It's at least decent. So it's roughly around about here where I start thinking about what kind of food court do I want. So I only went with a singular food vendor, which I believe was the Hot Dog Squad and the Cosmic Cow milkshakes. Now I was thinking about using the like little desk shop versions and making my own sort of like counter. But at the moment, this franchise is relatively quite young, and I don't want to risk at any point overspending as much as I already am. But here I'm putting down the pathing for the shops, so there's going to be a little bit of a struggle of me just trying to figure out what I want, where I want things, just to align it properly with the building, make sure there's enough space for customers to be angry that they're in a line and a queue and whatnot. So this is where I'm thinking about the shop front and just playing with the idea of it. I wanted it a bit more lighter than the actual stone. I think the stone's very cold in temperature when looking at it. And I very much like these Australian wood storefronts at least. And I wanted to put a little bit more personality on it, but I was struggling a little bit here about the cornering, because the cornering is different on the two different ones. So I kind of scrapped the idea and went with something a little bit different in a minute. But it was more, you know, just trying to fiddle with it. And I think experimenting with what you want things to look like is a good thing. And I think it shouldn't need to look perfect right off the bat, especially on franchise when you don't have that much money. There's a little saying I say on my live streams, which is ugly first, pretty later. You know, functionality, money making, get the animals in, get the people in, then worry about making it pretty later on. So at the moment, there is going to be probably more updates to the sloth enclosure and also the sloth. I'm going to call it the sloth house for now. I believe that's actually what I name it later on, but yeah, for now, we're just working on making it look functional and to make it look not so bleak and cold in there as well. So just a little bit of contrast between the red-ish flooring and also the cold, dry stone that is the walls itself. So here I'm just adding in an additional path. That way I can just put a little bench there for anyone to sit on if they wish to do so. I probably should have used a align to path kind of path, so it's a bit straighter so I can have the straight edge on it, but it works, it sits there quite nicely. But here I'm still experimenting with the whole make it yourself shop kind of thing. And I think I do scrap that idea eventually, we'll see in a minute, but I wasn't entirely happy with how it looked. And these poor workers got fired because I was placing things when it hires them as soon as I place it. So it's a little bit of an annoyance, in my opinion, that they get hired, and I kind of wish I could just hire them myself. But it does save you in the long run if you forget about them. So there is that. But yeah, in the end, I decide like the cube is needed. But I do struggle with it for a little bit because it just didn't look like it was correctly aligning to me. So yeah. So roughly here, I start having some complications with the pathing again. It's not the easiest thing, and I didn't realize that my hot dog squad um, shop was essentially flown in the air. I did obviously remove it then. The issue stands where now I have two vendors which don't belong there. So yeah, I do fix this in a second. So at this point, I wanted to put a little bit more detail onto the design of the shop fronts. I do go between a shop front idea that's already a prefab in the game versus the wooden beams, and I think I just stick with the wooden beams to conserve money. But just to make it look a little bit nicer, make it look like it pops out a little bit more, so it's not just a block in the building. I decided at this point that the Arctic shop fronts look so much better against the contrast of the lighter wood. I believe I stick with these in comparison to the actual full-on shop fronts from the New World packs. I just generally find that it worked. It worked really well with the difference of tonnage of the wood. Now we're getting into a little bit of the fun side of things where we're decorating. So, because I've got a hot dog squad and a cosmic cow milkshake, I wanted just to put a little bit of decoration on it. Not too much that's gonna put us into some money issues, but I just wanted to make sure we knew what shops they were because there's no shop front to it. And I think the signs make it really stand out as well. That sign was just way too big, but in the end, I think I'm happy with what I accomplished with the shops in general, just for something that's basic to begin with, at least. Now it's time to move on to the bit I dread the most, which is roofing. I believe I start off with this shop's roof first, so I'm just kind of like having a look to see what looks right for on top of the shop at least, or maybe not. Maybe I just decide that a roof is enough. I believe actually I put some lights underneath there, so I'm making a barrier kind of roofing to begin with, then I'm going to make some sort of elevated roof in a second after I've done this bit. But it's just more to give myself like a flat basis or a foundation to really make it pop. If you're having complications with your roofing like how I was in the corners, just put your grid to 1 and shimmy it to the side just by 1. That way it will interlock in a little bit of a better way in my opinion, and also it doesn't look too bad as you can see on the video. Now with the roof on, we can start working on the sloths finally. So I was thinking of a more of a greenhouse type enclosure. It wouldn't be exactly practical maybe in real life. It would be very probably hot in there for the sloths, but I think it works. You'll be able to see the sloths on the outside and on the inside technically, but obviously this the guests can only see from the inside, but it aligned up very nicely with the modern glass house panels. It made a very nice circular dome, sort of, well, not dome, but more of a rectangle, but I fiddled with it for quite a while. So here I'm having some issues with the fact that I've elevated the actual building, the shop building, by just a little bit. So it wasn't aligning properly to me. I ended up fixing this eventually by putting a nice, I want to call it a trim of the dry wall around where the wall meets the window. So I thought that broke up the sort of like window pattern just a little bit better, in my opinion. And I think it actually gives it a bit more personality as well. Here I noticed that I have two extra vendors by accident due to how I placed them earlier. So, bye bye. They got fired very promptly, just so I'm not wasting any money for when I unpause. But now we're going to start working on a staff area, just so I'm able to, look after the animals as well, because they're needed. We need it for a animal trade center as well, so we can get the sloths in as well. So we got to a point where we're near the final stretch, trying to get the animals in, and then we'll be doing a little bit more decorating on the inside of the greenhouse. Now, here is the one thing that I really dislike about Zoo, in my own personal preference, is if you have any sort of shop that sells food or drink, there will be litter no matter where you go. Unless you really dot around so many bins. And I don't really like too many bins around because I feel like in real life you wouldn't be, every bin every 2 seconds. It would be like a lot less. So that's what really kind of like irritates me on that one. But we'll see how the guests eventually deal with that. I should have enough coverage of bins in that area at least. At this point, I actually completely forgot that I had not given myself a trade center, so I needed to make sure I got that because I was trying to buy the sloths and I could not, for the life of me, do it. And I couldn't understand why, and now I do. Now we finally have sloths in our zoo, so we're just going to be putting them down right now. It will kind of mess around with the barriers of the exhibit, but again, we could just go in and put them to clear. That way you can't see them at all. From my knowledge, the sloths don't actually go up that high. They're more of a I'll dangle on a post kind of animal, but it should be alright in the end. They seem to keep within the habitat's enclosure, so I'm quite happy with it. What's probably nice about this is that the enclosure actually includes obviously quite a lot of climbing stuff, so I don't have to do that myself. So that's a nice plus. Luckily, I had just researched all the sloth stuff on my previous franchise just because I was interested in it, and thus these guys have the best of the best. So that's quite nice. But to me, this looked a bit empty. So I'm going to go through and have a look at a bit of foliage. So I was looking at where they come from and what biome they're from. So they're tropical from South America. So that's what I'm going to put into here. And I'm just going to go a little bit wild with the foliage just to make it look a little bit more pretty. So as I'm finishing the foliage here, I decided that the path needed a bit of separation from the grass. Just because logically, I think in real life, people wouldn't really understand to not go onto the grass and touch the animals. So I wanted to put a fence there. And what's really good is I love the workshop. I really advocate for it, and I'm going to include anything that I use, so that the only thing I've realistically used in this build is the fence that I am placing currently. I'll make sure anything I've used from the workshop is actually on the description of this video. That way the creator of the actual item gets a little bit of credit for what they do. But I really like this fence. It's simple, and it does its job. Now here's a common issue I get with putting custom fences sometimes, is they just don't align, your thing's too short for it. But luckily with this build, I was able to put just a little bit of a kind of like segue there, or a segment even, let's say that, where I could put educational boards there. So it kind of like didn't break up too much of the glass, which I kind of liked. But considering these are the same, lengths and whatnot, I could get away with having two, which is good for the education for this habitat. So here I'm placing the ambient speaker. I generally like to hide these where guests and myself cannot see them. That way it gives a little bit of like life to the habitat as well. We're also going to include educational speakers just to appease to the investigators, the reporters, people who are coming into the zoo and whatnot, and just to boost the education rating just a little bit, which I think overall helps with the exhibit in general. Now, coming towards the end of this build, I'm gonna work with the pathing just a little bit whilst I'm, finishing up. I really like this exhibit actually. It's a very simplistic starter exhibit, at least. It will get some good foot traffic, I think, and the guests will enjoy it. They'll interact with it, and especially with the food and drink, we should be all right as a good start to Willowcreek. In generalization, if you're wanting to put a suggestion for the next habitat, please make sure you leave a comment and maybe even like the video. This is my first time doing something like this, and I'm very nervous about it, but I'm very excited at the same time, and I think that's a good thing. But it's nice to see that the guests are able to interact with the house, the building. People are buying things. People are going in. It's just a general good vibe, and I'm really proud of this first build. It's nothing major, but again, I don't want to go too hard with the money. We want to make sure that we have some money in reserve for the next habitat. We're going to be putting some donation bins in at some point. I'm not sure if I actually do that in this current point, but I just wanted to just have a look, see how the guests are interacting with things, and I think it looks relatively good. I think I have no issues or quarrels with it. But yeah, there's a little bit more that I do to this in terms of decoration. As we come to the final leg of the Sloth house, I'm overall happy with it. There are things that I will edit and change once we get a little bit more financial stability in the game. But to start off with, I'm very proud of this. As we finish this video, I'm really proud of this product that I've produced today. And we're going to just finish off with some pan over shots of the animals and the guests, including some guest tracking that's absolutely horrible. But if you have any ideas of what I should do next, please leave a comment as I said before, and liking the video does so much for me. So thank you.